Look, no.
Okay, so today's topic for exploration is mindful eating. I'm sure most of us know what it's like to have a particularly stressful or emotional experience and reach for some sugar or a glass of wine or a packet of chips or something like that. So mindful eating is one way that we can help, manage that reactivity around food. There are lots of other benefits which I'll let Beck talk to when she starts her presentation. And the other reason we thought mindful eating would be a great topic today is that we're just about to head into the most chocolate-laden long weekend of the year with Easter coming up. So hopefully you can take some tips and strategies away from today's presentation for that, so you can enjoy the chocolate you do eat and leave the stuff that you don't need to the side. So Beck Rowe, this is the second time Beck has presented here at Wellness Wednesday. She's a fabulous presenter, a great talent, and has done lots of interesting work, and that's why we've invited her back. So I'll just hand over to you, Beck, and then we'll come back for a Q&A afterwards. So if you've got any questions throughout the session, keep them in the back of your mind, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask Beck at the end. Okay, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I know taking 15 minutes even out of a very busy day can be quite a big thing, especially just to come and listen to someone talk about how to eat, which is something that we would probably assume that we all know how to do already. I just wanted to start by asking you guys, does anyone know much about, if you just raise your hand if you're kind of familiar with the concept of mindful eating? I think it's something that gets thrown around a fair bit, so a few of you, yeah? So before I get started, like Eloise mentioned, I have done one talk here before, but that was on fitness. And I'm not sure about all of you guys, but I find food a lot more exciting than fitness, so I really love talking about this topic. My background is in sports physio, but I'm really passionate about food, so I've done some extra study in nutrition, and I've also done a lot of training in meditation and mindfulness as well. And I personally just really, really love food, so I really enjoy talking about this topic. I think the world these days has become so complicated when it comes to eating. We've got Instagram models, we've got a diet industry, we've got bloggers, we've got all these different sources of health information, and it becomes so tricky to know where to start basically when it comes to having a healthy diet but also enjoying food. So the latter part is what I really want to focus on a bit today, but obviously nutrition needs to play a role as well. I've only got 15 minutes, so the focus will be on the mindfulness rather than a pure nutrition focus. But I'll try and cover as much as I can. So if you've got any questions, feel free to pop your hand up, but otherwise you can come and have a chat to me at the end. So I think it's worth starting a discussion on mindful eating with a little bit of a chat about what mindfulness is. So I think mindfulness is quite commonly spoken about at the moment. It's quite in fashion. Meditation is really popular. Meditation classes are starting to really take off. But the definition of mindfulness itself is essentially being present in the moment and noticing your feelings, your thoughts, sensations around your body. Obviously in relation to food, it's noticing taste. But the most important part about the definition is without judgment. So I think a lot of us think mindfulness is being present, but that it's okay to then go and be judgmental about the present moment in our heads. But the really key part, and particularly when it comes to eating, is that it's about being non-judgmental of your present moment. Now, would anybody, can you all have a little bit of a think about times in your daily life when you would eat in a non-mindful way? So personally, recently, I don't know if anyone watches Married at First Sight, but I've got an embarrassing addiction to Married at First Sight, and I've been spending some of my evenings eating my dinner whilst I watch Married at First Sight. And that is an example of terrible mindful eating, because obviously I'm too absorbed in what's going on with all the ridiculous characters on the screen to be able to pay much attention to the tastes of the food and whether or not I'm feeling full and all those sorts of things that we would relate to mindful eating. So can anyone pop up their hand and share any times maybe in a normal day where you might experience a non-mindful eating moment? And I've embarrassed myself, so please. Yes. Yes? Yeah. So eating like between meetings and like quickly, yeah. And one of the most common problems for probably most of you guys who I assume mostly work at desks most of the day is that we tend to eat our lunch at our desk whilst we're doing work and taking a million phone calls and doing all these other things. And not only do you not get the chance to enjoy your food, but obviously again, you tend to eat more possibly than you normally would, and also feel a bit more dissatisfied at the end of the meal because you haven't really been focusing in on enjoying what you've had on your plate. Anyone else? Yeah?
Eating while we're listening to a mindful eating
That is a very, very ironic and excellent example. Any others? Yep. Yes. So that is a really, that light's bright. That is a really good one. So emotional eating is super common, and I think it has been really kind of frowned upon. I mean, there's some different arguments as to whether or not maybe it is okay to occasionally emotionally eat, but there is times when I'm sure we've all experienced where you've got a big packet of double Coke Tim Tams and you've had a bad day and all of a sudden the packet's gone and you really can't remember the frenzy of actually consuming each one of the Tim Tams. So there are many times when emotion can take over and mean that we're not even noticing at all what it is that we're eating. All right. So we're going to try and cover today, in this brief little period, why we should emotionally eat, why we should mindfully eat, the benefits of slowing down when we're eating, what hunger is versus a craving, and then lastly, just a few quick strategies that we can all employ in our daily lives that will make it a little bit easier for us to eat more mindfully. So why should we eat more mindfully? So I'm a big advocate for meditation, but what I find, most people think it's a really great idea, but they're usually not willing to set aside 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day to sit with their leg crossed on the floor and actually do the meditation. But the great thing about mindful eating is that you can get all of those benefits that you would normally get from doing a meditation through eating more mindfully. So you're staying present in the moment, you're slowing down, you're focusing on one thing, which is training your brain, better attention, etc. And you do start to get some of those health benefits that you would get from practicing an actual meditation through just eating more mindfully. So it's sort of a double whammy that you get out of it. Our digestion, so we've found through studies that when you actually pay attention to your food when you're eating, you get 30 to 40% better digestion. So if anyone, I won't make you put your hand up, but if you get IBS or you get a bit of a stomach problem ever, like from time to time, then eating more mindfully and more slowly will reduce your risk of having digestive issues. It's obviously much more obvious to us if we're still hungry whilst we're eating and whether or not we're full, if we're slowing down and paying attention, which is important for a lot of different reasons. Guilt around food is a big one. So I find the more that people start to learn how to actually notice what foods they enjoy and how they actually feel when they eat certain foods and start to make choices based on their own preference around food, you start to get a lot less guilt. And I know, like certainly in the media, there's so much around, you know, clean eating and like eating paleo and keto and all these different things, which is all well and good if that's your jam. However, the problem is that that then starts to create all these kind of emotional issues around food. And food is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be an experience that we really look forward to in our day. And being more mindful around what it is that we enjoy eating and how foods make us feel gives us the power back that we can actually be the ones making those choices rather than it being whatever's popular in the media at the moment. Touched on that. And the last one is binge eating, which obviously is actually a mental health disorder, and I'm not sort of talking about the more severe versions of that, but probably most of us have been through periods where we've tried a restrictive kind of eating plan, whether it's some sort of carb-free diet or sugar-free diet or something, and then it gets to Friday night and you have a couple of glasses of Sauv Blanc and suddenly you're just eating everything in sight. And that sort of thing tends to only happen when we're being really restrictive and not mindful around our food. So binging tends to be the result of restriction in the more extreme cases and in our kind of everyday life binging attempts. So again, mindfulness can help with those sorts of extreme reactions around food and a feeling of lack of control around food too. So this is a bit of a hard to read one, but essentially the point of this slide is that there's been a lot of studies into centenarians around the world, and I don't know if anyone's heard of the blue zone theory, but there are essentially certain countries around the world that have a lot higher rate of people that live over 100. And we know they also have a lower risk of heart disease, lower risk of cancer, and a lower risk of other things that will affect the quality of our lives. So it's worth sort of looking at those countries in the way that they eat, and obviously the foods they eat differ, but also their attitudes to food. So it's countries like Italy, Japan, and Greece. And anyone who's traveled to those countries probably knows how much they really appreciate food. Like they will sit down and it's such a big event, the family all sit around a table together. They spend a lot of time preparing food and making it look beautiful because they really enjoy the whole process. And that then means that obviously the eating process is a lot slower and more mindful as well. So there is some relationship between obviously improved health outcomes, and communities that do tend to spend more time actually mindfully preparing and enjoying food. So we are going to use our little Easter eggs. Has everyone got one? Just pop up your hand if you don't have one and we can bring one around. And if you've already eaten yours, you can also put your hand up and we'll get you another one. There's always someone who eats the egg before you're supposed to. So we're going to now cover off a 3-step way to improve your ability to mindfully eat. Now, keeping in mind that obviously you don't need to do this every time you eat for the rest of your life, because that would be rather absurd and time consuming. But if you just try and do this kind of 3-step process of like maybe once a day over the next few weeks, you just start to notice that you become more natural at that process of eating a bit more mindfully, and eventually it just incorporates and becomes part of your life. So the first thing we're going to do is arrive at the food. So we're not opening the foil up or anything yet. We're just going to sit in this room and have a little bit of a pay of attention to our surroundings. So environment plays a really big role when it comes to food, and all of you who've been maybe to Positano and sat on a balcony and enjoyed a pizza and said, this is the best pizza of my entire life, will agree that the environment does play a role. And obviously the Italians are probably better at making pizza, but there is a big part of it that's to do with the fact that you're sitting in a beautiful location with people that you love and you're feeling relaxed. So actually noticing your environment and paying attention to that before you even start to eat. The second thing is deciding whether or not you wish to eat. And for this exercise, it'd be great if you all just play along and decide to eat the egg. But generally, it is important to sit there and think, am I hungry, first of all? And then maybe the answer is yes, maybe it's no. And then think, why do I want to eat? So is it an emotional reason? Perhaps it's maybe just that everyone else is indulging in the egg and you want to get involved and feel part of the community, which is also fine. And then thinking about maybe how you'll feel after you eat that food, which is obviously something that we often tend to think about afterwards rather than prior to the eating process. And then once we've finally decided, okay, I'm a little bit peckish, I want to get involved in eating this chocolate, I've made the decision, I'm not going to feel too rubbish afterwards because it's just a little egg and I enjoy chocolate, we then move on to the process of actually tasting and eating the food. So this is called awakening to the food. So basically what we're going to do now is have a look at the foil wrapped egg and just have a little bit of a look. And this feels like really ridiculous, but trust me, it actually does work in the long run. So just have a look at the foil, pay attention to any memories that it brings up. So an Easter egg's quite a good one because there's often some nostalgic childhood memories around looking at an Easter egg. And then you can unwrap the egg, and I want you to have a look at the edge of the chocolate and just see, looking at it, what you think it might taste like from the look of it, which with chocolate is probably very different. The look of it is very different to what the actual taste is. Like I think if you looked at it and had no memory of chocolate, you'd probably be like, I don't want to eat this, it looks gross. So have a look at it now, and just have a look at if there's any little crevices in it. I think we've got some very fancy butchie eggs, so I don't know if they have the little crevices in it, but if you have a look at it, turn it around in your hand, and then bring it up to your nose and have a smell of the chocolate. So just like really close your eyes and enjoy the smell of the chocolate. And imagine what it's going to taste like when you finally put it in your mouth. And maybe that smell brings back some memories. So we know the olfactory nerve, which is responsible for smell, is really good at bringing back memories. So maybe when you smell that chocolate, you remember a time when you were a kid and you were fighting over Easter eggs with your siblings, or maybe it brings you back to last weekend when you ate a little bit too much chocolate and it makes you feel a bit sick. So smells bring back a lot of memories, so it's worth just like really enjoying that for a second. And then we're going to pop it in our mouths, but we're not going to chew yet. So just place the egg into your mouth. Sorry if you're still eating salad, this is a bit of a gross intermission, but. So pop it in your mouth and just try and hold it there. And just notice the texture of the food in your mouth. So just like roll it around in your mouth. Pay attention to how it feels on the surface. It might start to melt a little bit maybe, and just noticing the flavors that start to come out. Notice if you roll it around in your mouth, how the different flavors start to come out, because our tongues have different nerves in every single part of them. So you'll be able to get different flavors as you move it around on your tongue. Now very slowly, we're going to start to chew. But keeping in mind that the average person chews once or twice before they swallow, we should be chewing at least 8 times. Because the chewing mechanism in our mouth is meant to be the first part of the digestive process. So when you bite off food, chew once and swallow, you're then giving your gut a whole bunch of extra work that it isn't really supposed to do, which means that of course you're going to end up with a stomachache when you finish your meal. So chewing, I'm going to try and chew 16 times before we swallow. Yeah. And there should still be some left there, like you'll be able to really macerate it with your teeth. And then once you've done your 16 chews, you can swallow, but I want you to pay attention to the taste and the feel of it as it travels to the back of your tongue, and then notice it as it travels down your throat. And then pay attention to the aftertaste, because chocolate often gives us a really lovely aftertaste in our mouth that often leaves us wanting more. And a lot of the sweet senses are at the back of our tongue, so often you'll get this really lovely aftertaste that's almost nicer than the experience of the chocolate itself. So just sit there and like revel in the taste of the chocolate in your mouth that's left over. Now, put your hand up if that's the speed at which you would usually eat an Easter egg. Great, I've got one over there, that's wonderful. I used to be like that when I was trying to stop my brothers. I wanted to make them jealous, so I would eat my Easter eggs probably that slowly so that they'd run out before me. But generally, most of us eat a lot more quickly than that. So in this scenario, what we would only do afterwards is think about, A, did I enjoy that food? So that's always worth thinking about. I think in the world of health and wellness, we get a bit caught up on, did it cover my proper nutrients, and is this fitting with my current diet that I've decided to be on? But actually thinking about, was this food something that I enjoyed? And sometimes treat naughty foods, and I put that in very strong inverted commas, are in fact not actually things that we enjoy that much, or maybe we enjoy one, but we wouldn't actually enjoy it that much if we kept eating. So one, did I enjoy this food? And two, how do I feel after eating it? So probably from that tiny egg, you're not feeling like tired and lethargic from eating one little bit of chocolate, so probably didn't make a massive difference to your energy levels. Maybe though, you're feeling some guilt because perhaps you were on a sugar-free diet and now I've broken it for you, or perhaps you're thinking about some memories that the chocolate taste has brought back. So it can create a whole bunch of different feelings after eating. But obviously this is a very specific scenario, so I'm going to get you to have a bit of a think about a situation where maybe you're on holidays. Maybe you've just checked into your 4-star retreat in Bali, in the non-trashy part of Bali, and you've come out in the morning to breakfast and they've served this most beautiful buffet, and you're kind of simultaneously really excited but also a bit nervous because you know how you get around buffets. And you sit down, you have your first plate of fruit salad and muesli, then you go back and you get some toast and eggs and you're thinking, this is reasonable, this isn't an all right amount of food. And then you realise that there's some pastries and you're like, oh, should I indulge in the pastries? So we're going to hit the pause button for a second here. And what we always should think about in this situation is going through those steps again. Number one, am I still enjoying this food? So sometimes it does get to this stage where you're kind of like weirdly force feeding yourself because you're like, well, it's there, so I should keep eating. So am I still enjoying the taste of these foods? Number two, am I full? And you may be full and choose to keep eating, and that's okay, but perhaps you already overindulged yesterday and you've decided today maybe I'm going to listen to my fullness cues. And then thirdly, thinking about how is this going to make me feel afterwards? So oftentimes I think we're so busy indulging in the moment and we're not eating slowly enough that we end up kind of forgetting about the fact that food has a really, really big impact on our energy levels and how we feel after eating. And maybe that day you wanted to go out and enjoy the sights of Uluwatu and you really want to be feeling at your best, and eating another plate of pastries is possibly going to mean that it impacts on your ability to enjoy the day. Or maybe it won't. So just actually taking the time to sit there and think about those things makes a really big difference to our appreciation of our food, but also how we feel with the rest of our day. So hunger versus cravings is an interesting one. Does anyone, put your hand up if you ever struggle to kind of tell the difference between being a bit peckish and like just kind of being bored? Because I find definitely that I get that from time to time. So one of the things that a lot of dietitians suggest is what's called the broccoli test. So generally if you're just having a craving rather than being hungry, they theorize that if you were offered, so you just think, okay, well if I was offered a big plate of broccoli right now, would I still want it? And obviously, if the answer is yes, you're probably hungry and it's not a craving. So that is something that you could try. But alternatively, it's a lot more about thinking about the longevity of the sensation. So if you're getting physical sensations of a grumbling stomach, that's a good indicator that you're actually hungry. Additionally, if you're noticing that the craving or the feeling of wanting to eat doesn't go away, even if you get distracted, so say you are like, okay, yeah, I've been thinking about chocolate for a while now, am I hungry or is it a craving? Maybe go and chat to one of your colleagues and distract yourself for a little while, or do a bit of work and then see if it still stays around. And also notice if there's any emotion around it. So emotional feelings around food, if you're genuinely hungry, are usually not there. So again, if you're noticing that it's a real sort of weird, you're feeling really emotional about that need to eat a certain food, then it's probably more a craving rather than hunger. So I'm just going to go through now a few different tools and tips that I use to try and incorporate mindful eating into my day without having to sit there and spend an hour eating every single meal. So this is a mindful eating diary that we sometimes get. So if you're someone who really struggles with this whole process and you find you're really not intuitive with eating, and you're maybe someone who's been on hundreds of different diets and you're constantly yo-yoing up and down with your weight, then something like this can be quite helpful just to start kind of bringing you back into your body and helping you to remember what it's like to actually pay attention to what you want and what you feel like your body needs. So just going through and writing down like why you're actually eating the food, rate your hunger at that time, and then what you ate and whether it felt like it actually satisfied what your body needed at the time, and then how you felt after the meal. And that could include your emotions, but also your energy levels and those sorts of things. And you can rate all of those things out of 10 if you're that sort of person. But this sort of thing can be helpful just to sort of notice if there's patterns over time that maybe you might like to change because they may be impacting your enjoyment of your life in a negative way. There's also something called the hunger fullness scale. Has anyone seen this before? Maybe not. So it's essentially designed because as human beings we tend to be surprisingly out of touch with our own bodily feelings, but it's 0 to 10 scale. So generally the 10 level is how you feel after Christmas lunch, versus 0 might be if you skip breakfast and it gets to kind of 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're really thoroughly starving. So noticing you should really only be between the 4 to 7 at any time. So if you notice that you get down to that sort of you're getting hunger pangs, then it's definitely time to eat. We know that if your blood sugar starts to drop when you get past this level, then you may start to make less wise or less mindful food choices. And then when you are eating, trying to notice that you don't ever get past that 7. So 7 is about the point where you'll probably still feel energized after eating, rather than getting into that stuffed kind of phase where you're probably going to feel like your energy has dropped a lot after eating. So these are some other just little brief tips. I think the main one for me is this thing around kind of making a real event out of eating. And I know we're all busy and a lot of you have children, but it is a really nice time, especially if you do have a family, to start creating a real sort of ritual around your eating. And I think, like I said earlier, Australians are probably not typically the best at creating real rituals around our food, and it is such a nice way to start actually enjoying food, enjoying the preparing of food. So actually getting the kids to set the table and like put some flowers on the table and make it a real experience. So creating that ambience around it, making sure you do sit down to eat. So like grabbing a sushi roll and walking down the street and chatting on your phone is obviously not a great way for your digestive system to work, but also not great for your ability to stay mindful while you're eating. Not sitting in front of the TV like me. Try not to work. So if you can actually take a break, that's really beneficial. And making sure that you don't eat out of a bag or a box. So if you get your food takeaway and you go back to work, it is worth like plating it, because you'll realize that they give you like 2 serves of food when they put it in a bag or a box. But also, again, it makes it a really nice, enjoyable process. And the last thing is eating foods that you enjoy. So I'm so passionate about this, and I think it's time for us to sort of bring back our love for food and just remember that food is much more than nutrients. It's meant to be an enjoyed thing as well. So I'll leave you with this last little quote. And I think if you can take 2 things away, one is just, like I said, just bringing back your enjoyment around food and starting to enjoy the whole process around eating, and that will make a really big difference to your ability to then feel satisfied at the end of the meal. And then secondarily, also just not being too critical of yourself. So part of that mindfulness is not being judgmental. So if you do slip up and eat too much chocolate or whatever over Easter, just noticing how it made you feel afterwards, and those sorts of like that kindness to yourself afterwards, like thinking, oh, I did feel a bit sick, maybe I won't do that next time, is a much more effective way of making behavioural change in our brain than doing it in too much of a harsh kind of cracking the whip at yourself way. And that is all from me. I'll just put my email address up if anyone has any questions, but I've possibly gone over time, sorry.
That's okay, great presentation. Thank you, Beck. Does anybody have any questions for Beck? Probably got time for one, maybe two. Pretty comprehensive. Nope. Not one question. Very good. Okay. Well, it's nearly 1:30, so I just thought I'd let you know that we needed to give you those mindful eating tips before launching this competition. I'm not going to tell you how many Easter eggs are in this jar, but we have 2 of them, one here, one over on the side. And next week we'll be announcing the winner of these 2 jars. So 2 people are going to be able to take home a jar each and pour them over their kids, or throw them, to your neighbours, or do whatever you want to do with them. On the Charlie app, if you go to next week's Wellness Wednesday event, we're going to be exploring chocolate and the benefits, the health benefits of chocolate. And I really invite you to actually enter the competition there as well when you get a chance, when you get back to your desk, or even now if you want to check it out. The other thing I wanted to say is that Rowe is a fabulous example of the community getting involved with who they want to present. So Taryn from Agencia has introduced Beck to us, and we're really grateful for it. She was fabulous. But these sessions are for you. So if there's any topic you want explored, or if there's somebody that you'd like to hear from, we've got John Owen from Wayside Chapel coming up in a couple of weeks. He has replaced Graham Long, as the head of Wayside Chapel. Again, another request from one of the community members here. So don't be shy, reach out either through the Contact Charlie tab, or on the app, or just via email if there's something that you want to know more about. So thank you so much, Beck, for coming today. Can we give her a really nice round of applause? She will be back in approximately 6 weeks to talk to us about sleep hygiene, another very important topic. So I hope you all have a great afternoon, stay in touch, book in for next week, and make sure you enter the Easter egg competition. Have a great afternoon.